All right, we're gonna get started here. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Justin. I am a Community Development Officer with the Community Development Unit, which is a part of the Alberta Culture, Multiculturalism, and Status of Women. I'll be one of your hosts today, and I'm joined by one of my colleagues, Leah, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, as well as Phil, who's providing support on the technology side of things. Welcome to the third and final installment of our Pivot online webinars. Today we'll be talking about virtual organizations and moving programs and services online. We'd like to take a moment to recognize that this is the homeland of many diverse people in Alberta, including First Nations and the Métis people whose ancestors have walked this land since time immemorial. We're incredibly grateful to work, live, and learn on this traditional territory. Before we begin, we have a message from the Honorable Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism, and Status of Women that we'd like to share with you.
Welcome, everyone. I am beyond thrilled to introduce this webinar. The COVID-19 pandemic brought about unprecedented challenges, but with those challenges came some really unique opportunities. We've seen many phenomenal examples of how artists and nonprofits pivoted their work online even before the pandemic. Technology had been changing, and the way we do business, it's been happening for decades, but the pandemic has shown why it's so important that we learn to adapt in this new world. Change is never easy. That is why we developed a Pivot Online, a toolkit for artists and nonprofit organizations to help you work remotely and extend your reach in the digital age. I trust you will find this webinar and toolkit helpful and will learn some really useful tips that will help you reach your goals. And with that, I'm so happy to turn this over to our webinar hosts. Thank you.
All right, just a number of key facts that we want to share. The Alberta nonprofit sector is a bigger economic driver than technology, restaurant, and retail trade, with more than 26,000 nonprofits employing 280,000 Albertans. It generates more than $5.5 billion in GDP annually. Alberta's visual and applied arts and live performance industries generate 1.3 billion in GDP and nearly 20,000 jobs annually. The purpose of this webinar is to provide an overview of the toolkit, demonstrate some of the tools within, and share insights learned from artists and organizations who have pivoted their work online, and provide information, resources, as well as inspiration to help artists and nonprofit organizations pivot some or all of their operations online. Really, the information presented in this webinar is at an introductory level. With that being said, information presented as well as the related materials are not intended to constitute legal advice, the rendering of legal concepts, consulting, or professional services of any kind. We simply want to share the information with you that we think will be helpful as you navigate your organization through its online journey. For any specific situations or questions that your organization may have related to the material, we do encourage that you seek any professional advice related that's relevant. If you have any questions or thoughts throughout the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A, the question and answer function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll try to get through as many as we can within the time frame. If you don't have this functionality, just feel free to use the chat box feature because it connects to the hosts. We will also be recording this session today, and you'll receive a link in your email when the recording is available. So feel free to share it with anybody or organizations that you think this will be beneficial. If you missed some of our previous webinars, they will also be online. So, keep a lookout on your emails. There is also a number of resources on alberta.ca under Alberta's nonprofit and voluntary sector website. So I'll have Phil put that link as well if you're looking for more information. Today, we're really going to go through the Pivot Toolkit online. And Phil, again, will post a link to the chat box to see where you can find it. Actually, I think it's on that page, so no need to repaste that, Phil. But there's also a French version online that's been completed if you require the toolkit in French. We're also happy to provide closed captioning for this webinar. So if you want to enable it, if you haven't done so, there is a function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Click on closed caption and show subtitle. And you could also change the appearance of the subtitles there using the settings. So before we move on to some of the information today, we want to ask you the following question through a poll, and Phil's going to pull up a poll here, and we want to ask, how have you pivoted online during this pandemic period, whether it's you, an artist, an organization? Have you moved some or all of your operations to remote operations? Have you ramped up your social media presence? Some of all your programs online, or none of the above? So we'll give you a few seconds to input your answers. Yeah, and what we're seeing so far is pretty standard from what we've seen in the other webinars. Many of you have shifted some of your operations to remote, some specific programs and online, and definitely looks like many of you as well are ramping up your social media presence during this time. So that's good. Phil, you can stop the poll there and share it. So this has been pretty standard in our previous ones as well, that I'm assuming many of you are here today because you are either in that process of shifting or are shifting and looking for more information. So this next section, we'll just do a little bit of a brief overview of what the Pivot Online Toolkit is. We know among the struggles of the COVID-19 pandemic came many phenomenal examples and insights for how artists and nonprofit organizations can pivot their work online. Albertans and organizations have integrated changes to how we work, collaborate, learn, and shop as a new norm. Technical and digital engagement will continue to be seen as complementary to in-person experiences, and some organizations continue to deliver certain services online in a different way. And really, the toolkit captures and shares the insights learned from artists and organizations who've pivoted their work online, and provides information, resources, as well as inspiration to help artists and nonprofit organizations pivot for some or all of their online operations. It should be also noted that the toolkit provides basic information on a variety of options that folks can take. The guide by any means is not exhaustive, but we'll try our best to regularly update to reflect the most accurate information. Really, the intention of the toolkit is, for artists as well as arts organizations, but also very relevant to the nonprofit sector as a whole. As you pivot online, you may find yourself using a variety of tools and software for online engagement. And keep in mind to reduce your risks, make informed decisions, as well as ensure your rights and are protected. It's important to review the company's terms of service, any privacy policies and security policies, and consider the company's policies around intellectual property and ownership, copyright, dispute resolution, consumer protection, and more. As an organization, if you're here as representing an organization, you may have some internal policies of your own risk management plans to make sure that you take a look at that, as well as maybe find alignment on what you're using, as well as what your organization's goals are. Finally, we don't endorse or recommend any of the policies directly. They're just options for you as an individual or organization to explore. If you had a chance to take a look at the toolkit, you probably have seen that it's split up into these 3 sections. The first one being success in a digital world. And really, this provides information and resources to help you consider your options in terms of pivoting your work online. This section also includes top considerations that your organization may want to consider before moving online, from ramping up your social media, live streaming, to potentially selling online. This section is kind of those areas. The second part here really lists a number of supports that are currently available to help artists and nonprofits pivot their operations online. This support could be in the form of financial help, expertise, skills, digital tools, and other community resources. And as things move, we probably know there's more and more of those supports and resources available that we're just currently working on updating. The third part is pivoting with an impact, and this was developed really to leave things on an inspirational note. And it never hurts to have more examples to emulate, especially if those examples are from organizations that are pivoting and doing well within their own communities. The examples range from providing virtual programming or services, live streaming concerts, or running an online storefront. So we're excited, speaking of pivoting with an impact, to hear some success stories through the Edmonton-based Citadel Theatre. And for those who don't know, the Citadel Theatre is an Edmonton-grown theatrical powerhouse that creates extraordinary productions made for Edmonton, but fit for any of the world's stages. It's one of the largest nonprofit theaters in North America, drawing from a large geographic region that includes the greater Edmonton area, as well as central and northern Alberta. Chantell Ghosh is the executive director at Citadel Theatre. She's a native Edmontonian with years of experience in marketing and communication. We know that storytelling has really been at the heart of her work over her career, which has made her a great fit for promoting the Citadel Theatre to Edmontonians, to Canadians, and beyond that. So we're very excited to have Chantell share some of her experiences, knowledge, and expertise. So, let's welcome Chantell. I know we can't hear your claps or, any of these, but we'll welcome her today. So thank you, Chantell, for joining us here. Just for those, your background is the Citadel Theatre. And so for those who have not been to the Citadel or seen the Citadel, this is what it looks like at its peak lights and bustling downtown. I know we mentioned a few things, Chantell. Is there anything else that the organization does that I haven't mentioned yet?
Well, we obviously do our productions that we build from scratch. We create original works as well as, much beloved works. We present other types of artists, musical artists and other theater works. And we run a school, which is really, really important to us. It's been around a long time. I went to it when I was 10 years old, many, many, many moons ago. And it's something that has launched the careers of a lot of actors that have gone on to Broadway. So it's a pretty big part of what we do. And as you can see behind, it's a pretty big building when it's all lit up. So it's got 5 venues and the school and a number of tenants in it that keep it the wonderful bustling place it is when we can all gather together to go to theater.
Right. And I mean, like many of us, many organizations, of course, this current time has affected your day-to-day operations. What are, how has really this affected your ability to run what you do?
Well, I mean, I think I can look back and say March 12th was the day the world stopped for us in 2020. We had a big show, Garneau Block and Rehearsal, was going into dress rehearsal, was starting production that weekend. We had 2 shows in production ourselves, plus we had Mercury Opera in our building doing Mercury Opera. And with a couple of hours notice, we were told no gathering over 250 people. Our audiences are significantly bigger than that. And so we shut down our live theater operations with a few hours notice and sent 3 casts home. It was a lot of uncertainty. At that time, we had a conversation that we thought it'd be, maybe 90 days. Like, do we think maybe a 3-month delay? And at that time, many people thought I was very pessimistic for saying 90 days. Now I feel like, if I would have said that now, people are like, well, that's optimistic of you. So it really shut down everything, and not just from a production standpoint, but also our tenants are at the time were 2 theaters, 3 restaurants, and a dentist. So they all had to shut down their operations, and all the way that they, sort of engage their patrons and make their revenue was stopped. And it was a really challenging time of the season for us, because February and March is when we start ramping up and selling subscriptions for the next year. And that's also when most of our personal donations come in. So it was a real pivotal point to just have everything stop in its tracks. And our number one concern was obviously the safety of our team and our patrons, and then the rest we just had to deal with the fallout. So it's had an incredible impact in that we've been able to do none of our regular programming and very small scale in-person programming prior to the shutdown again in November. But we had to pivot. We had to figure out what could we do. So we've actually been really busy, just not doing what we usually do.
Right. So yeah, I mean, tell us about that. How did you shift your work? How did you pivot to like a virtual organization?
Well, I would say that first what we did is we all panicked and thought it was the end of the world, and it felt like it. And we freaked out and we thought, how are we going to survive this? And is our team going to survive this? And all the artists that we employ. And that was a big panic and a big feeling. And it still every now and then kind of bubbles up. But what we decided to do was really lean into who we are and what it is that we're trying to accomplish through the Citadel Theatre. We've been around for a long time. We have a strong mandate, but we went back and we looked at our strategic plan, that we're constantly refreshing and looking at. And we said, how does this fit? If these are the right strategic initiatives for us in times when things are, going fairly smoothly, how do we lean into them when things are clearly, everything has gone sideways, nothing is going smoothly at all? And we found a great deal of direction and comfort in those strategic initiatives. We had 4 initiatives. One, theater came first, that we were there to produce creative works of art, of theater. The other was that we wanted, about leaning into our stakeholder engagement, amplifying the love, making sure that our sponsors and our patrons and our team members all felt connected to us, and that we were engaged with them and that they were with us on this journey. Looking at being the heart and hub of the performing arts in Edmonton, and how do we lift up other types of art forms and other artists and provide supports. And then transforming our business model as part of our strategic initiative. Now, I don't think we ever thought that this was going to be how we transformed our business model by producing no theater in person, that kind of thing. But it really helped center us, and it helped settle the panic. And we took a big deep breath and we said, how do we lean into these things in a time when all of our regular tools and methods are not available to us?
Yeah. And I mean, we'll talk about some of those, like the programs specifically that you've, used an online platform to do. But I want to talk about kind of that internal dynamic, because you've kind of talked about, like, we panicked a little, we had to, kind of hunker down, panicked a lot. There we go. But in terms of, like, I guess organizationally, internally, how did you transition some of that work? I assume most of the day-to-day had been in person, but now obviously not. So what were some of the internal dynamics there to this transition?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts in theater. And we have, at the height of our season, I have 400 people that are getting paychecks from us, from a wide variety of walks of life, from creative to, administrative to our facility. So, that's, for me, that was the biggest responsibility I felt, is how do we make sure that at the end of this, the Citadel Theatre is there to create work and provide livings for these people. So the panic from the internal dynamics really comes to how we create theater. We plan years in advance. We know the shows that we're going to be doing, a year and a half out, 2 years out. We have other things in development. So it's a very long runway, because you have to plan for it. You have to design it. We build everything from scratch. We do things very, very well, with lots of detail, to perfection, and they take a long time. All of a sudden, we were in a situation where all of our planning was out the window. It was, we had plan A, plan B, plan C. We're into the double letters now, into, the special characters on the keyboard. So we had to kind of abandon a plan and just, again, use our strategic initiatives and what we wanted to do as our guiding, our guiding signposts, and say, okay, are we meeting the needs of our community and our team and what we're supposed to be doing? And we had a lot of moments of reflection within our organization, because to pivot and to say, there was different options we could take. And some organizations simply just closed the doors. It was the turtle that said, you know what, let us know when this is over and we will come back and do what we do best. And some made very public acknowledgements of that, said we are not going to be trying to produce things online, and we're not, we'll come back when things are better. And that's, that is a totally valid way to approach it if you feel that you can't pivot and you can't make those changes. We, on the other hand, are a bunch of sort of itchy disruptors, which is wonderful. And my artistic director, Daryl Clorent, who's a wonderful creative soul, and myself, were like, we can't do nothing. We can't do nothing. One is that it will drive us crazy from a psychic standpoint. Like, we have to produce things and create things, and we have to give our team and our community hope. So we started right off the hop by doing our Stuck in the House series. We generally have something called the House series, which is small, more intimate concerts and presentations in our small theater. Well, those were out, and of course we're all at home. So we thought, well, we'll do a Stuck in the House series. And we engaged, at the time, we thought we were very ambitious, and we said, we are going to do one of these online performances, like up to 10 minutes of whatever that actor, musician wanted to do, self-curated. They're all incredibly creative and talented, and we made sure we could pay them, because paying for art is really, really important. We said, well, let's do one of these for every day that the theater is closed. And we had enough money to do 80. And again, we thought, well, that's pretty good. And now we know that it might have been a bigger commitment than we knew we were making at the time. But we were able to engage artists to do something from their home, creative and lovely, and to have patrons who felt a little bit untethered. I mean, we all felt untethered at that time. It was scary and unknown, and we didn't know a lot about what was happening. And to just be able to peek in and have an Oscar Dirk sing you some songs from As You Like It while his cats are chewing on his guitar was incredibly comforting. And it was an intimate look at people that you usually see in very polished performances at the Citadel, and they were so well received. And we started to build on that. So right from literally the day after shutdown, we decided we were going to do this, and it kept us sane, and I think it kept our patrons, it allowed them a window into some creative things that kept them buoyed and excited and knowing that we were there. And it set the pace for the other things then that we were able to do, because we had to give up planning, we had to give up perfection, we had to give up control, which is very hard. I mean, this is an industry where people wear headsets and make sure everything happens at the exact same time every night. And realize that we just had to continue that relationship with our artists and our team and our patrons in new ways.
And I know, in order to do this, I know I know some people here are specific to, like, what did you use? How did you connect with people? Were you dialing everyone on the phone? Were there any specific tools or software that you used to help kind of collaborate, meet, these types of things?
We had to get technical very fast, because our phone system at the Citadel is so ancient. I think, what is it, Nortel? It's a Nortel phone system. I think it's run by 4 hamsters in a ball, and there was no, there was no ability to take our existing systems home with us. So we figured out Zoom very quickly. We had used other things, but Zoom was super low barrier to entry, very easy to navigate for a bunch of people with very wide and varied technological abilities and equipment. And we made a decision very early on that we need to build a subject matter expert out of our team. Like, none of us knew Zoom, but someone was going to learn it. And we have a producer who is very tech savvy and an amazing moderator, much like yourself. And she just went and figured it out. And she then started to produce our Zoom meetings and our webinars and our master classes like they were shows. And it was really wonderful to see that transference of skills and recognize that, no, we didn't have anyone who knew how to do Zoom, but we know people who knew how to organize people and how to, figure out a run of show and just use a different tool to do it. So Zoom was a big one for us. With our Stuck in the House series, we just started to use our Facebook, and we realized there was danger with any sort of live watch parties. There were, especially when we were asking people to do this in their homes. That felt a little too risky. We were prepared to take some risks, but totally unedited live things from other people's facilities was not quite we weren't getting on that tightrope quite yet. So we would record them, and then we would set up watch parties, and we would try different times of day to see when we would, when it got the most eyes, and working with the artists themselves and promoting it and creating a donate button. And I mean, we played with a lot of stuff, and some of it, some of it worked wonderfully. Some of it was a complete and utter bust. And we had to be prepared to go, we're going to try this thing, and it might be terrible and it might be wonderful. And the performances were all amazing. Some of the testing that we did around, donate buttons and different times didn't work as well. And so then we just didn't do those things again.
Right. And so I like that you make that point, because I think many people today might be a little bit scared or nervous about just trying things, right? Getting it out there, and whether you fail miserably or it's a success, even like taking that step to try, I feel like is often hard. And so I want to hear about, because you mentioned kind of that transition of, hey, we haven't done this before, now we're going to do it. Like how did you speak that to your staff, to the people involved, like, to kind of take that journey with you to do that? Was it easy? Was it difficult? How was that?
It was both those things. So when we went back and we looked at a strategic plan, we actually went and presented to our board and our team in a town hall and said, look, we can't do any of the things we planned on doing. So let's look at our strategic initiatives. And here's what we are going to focus on. Here's how we're going to engage patrons. And we kind of left it very open-ended because everything was so uncertain. So we kind of said, here's the rules that we're going to play by for the next 3 months. And we kind of bit it off in 3-month chunks, because honestly, the idea that this was going to be going on for a year, I think would have, I don't know what we would have all been having to get talked off the ledge at that point. So we talked about 3-month increments. Here's what's going to happen in the next 3 months. And we kind of tied our tranches of time to what we knew was going on in the public health world. We were told, look, we're going to look at new regulations or restrictions in May. So we kind of had March to May. And we thought, how do we engage our team and our stakeholders and our sponsors and our patrons and our artists in that time? And we dealt with it that way. I will tell you, there were some resistance. There were people that they really were having difficulty transitioning or getting on board, or they were very worried about the downside of everything. Well, what if this happens? Well, what if this happens? And it's great to have those folks in the room. We had to kind of refocus people's attention and say, look, we don't want to be problem finders. We want to be problem solvers. So when you think of something that you think, if this goes badly, it could go really badly, I'd like you to come with some alternatives, either alternatives to what we're suggesting we do to accomplish the same goal, or some alternatives to how do we mitigate for that risk. And the minute that we started to do things, and we kind of put our toe in the water, we didn't just jump in.
Right.
And to see how well things were received, how well the Stuck in the House series received, how well the online classes were received, and the master classes and that kind of thing were received, it gave us a lot of courage, right? And even those who were very nervous, because we are perfectionists in this building, in this business, we want it to be a wonderful experience. We want to transport people. So anything less feels like a sellout. But we had to kind of say, look, don't let perfect be the enemy of great and innovative. And we're going to fall down, and that's okay. I'm giving you permission. I'm giving you permission to fall down, and then we'll figure out something new, because we kind of felt the expectations were fairly low. People were just like, whatever you can do. Especially at the start of it, it's like, can you do anything? Awesome. And we were supported in that through our board, through our stakeholders, our shareholders, and it made it easier.
Right. So, I mean, you bring up two really important kind of, cogs in this machine, your board and potentially sponsors and stakeholders. And so, you talk about taking those risks, like how many people today might be like, I don't know if I can come to my board and say, this is what we're doing. Do you have any advice for folks to, help in that area of taking the risks and so on?
Well, first, make sure you're recruiting awesome people to your board, and you get some input on that, because I am blessed. I am blessed that we have a board that cares deeply about the theater and also understands the practicality. They bring a really wide swath of skills and experiences. And because they built the strategic plan with us, when we made that presentation to them in the spring and said, here's our strategic initiatives, here's the way we're going to fulfill this during this time. And it was kind of an open-ended, it wasn't a blank check, but it was kind of open-ended. We're not sure exactly what might that look like, but this is what we're focusing on. They were so supportive, and they were like, we trust you. We also have the benefit, I don't want to pretend that as a leader, I'm afraid always that I'm going to make a decision that'll sink the ship. But our ship is a pretty strong ship. And as much as we are always on the knife's edge of the budget every single year, we are very, very blessed to have had founding families and patrons who created a private endowment fund that sits off, and we get a little bit of interest from that every year that, helps us, but it sits there. And I knew that if things went very terribly, and that we could not find a way to stay solvent, that we had the ability to reach into our, I would go and ask them, like, we need to keep the lights on. So we had that little insurance policy with our endowment, and that it took away some of the pressure, because there was nothing we could do that was going to destroy the Citadel. And I think many of us felt that, especially in this industry, we're in an existential crisis. We are blessed to have a bit of a backup plan and to have some supports there. I also feel that it's incumbent upon us, because of that, to try and create as many opportunities and lift up as many others who don't, artists and creators and playwrights and companies that don't necessarily have that same backup plan, and how do we support them? So we had that board that was there from the moment, and our corporate sponsors that we reached out to and said, that sponsorship you did for the show that is sitting literally on our stage and we can't do that now. We can't maybe do it for a while, but here are the things that we would like to do. And I will say, almost without exception, every single corporate sponsor came to us and said, you do what you can do. We want to help you. This is a partnership. This is a long-term relationship. Serve the community in any way you can and use that sponsorship for that. And we will be here when you come back to support you in your regular programming. What a gift. I mean, what a gift. And, and that's like the Capital Powers and the EPCORs of the world, and, RBC and TD. Like, these are community organizations that, were there for us. And I say that all of the government support that we got, our grants coming in and the wage subsidy, that allowed us to stay solvent. That kept us alive. Our corporate sponsors and our patrons and our individual donors, they helped us create in this time. Survival is one thing, but creation is what we're about. And it took that level of support to be able to have us do it. So once we kind of got momentum, people were really on board. We're very lucky.
Yeah, and it's great, and I hope it encourages people on the webinar today too. Like, if there are some kind of apprehensions to speaking to your board and to your sponsors, just to be honest and say, this is what's happening. This is what we hope to do with, where our, aligning, as you mentioned, with your strategic plan and priorities and things like that. And so, now you've had these, obviously a theater experience. Part of it is going to the theater, and now we know that you mentioned the Stuck in the House series, and if people got a chance to see the Christmas Carol online today, so now you've kind of shifted some of that online. And I know you mentioned you were testing, you were trying, and many organizations and maybe artists here today are wondering, like, well, how are you getting the info that you're doing the right thing? Like, well, how are you hearing from your patrons? What does that look like in terms of shifting some of your programs and services online? And how do you, change and adjust and so on? So can you talk a little bit about some of those programs?
Absolutely. I mean, I think everyone needs to recognize that you're building a plane while flying it. So you're going to have to change and adjust. And so there were some things that went really, really well. I mean, any of our free programming, we got wonderful feedback from, people were, watching, they're engaging, they're so thankful. But we knew that when we started to put up some sort of paywall to attending things, and either virtually or in person, that is very much a report card for an organization. What are people willing to pay for or donate towards? And we had to play around with that. And it hasn't been perfect. So, we built out the road shows, and you could hire them out, but we also sent them out for a number of public performances. So those were outside. So we created theater everywhere we could create it when we could create it. So online, outside. When we started in the fall with a small series that we would normally put in our smaller theater, the Rice Theater, we call it the Horizon series. These were not shows that we were originally going to do, but they're all small cast, 2 people that we could manage within the cohort protocols for producing theater for an audience of 100. We moved those productions into our big theater. And we recognize that no matter what the government restrictions might be at any given time, there are certain people that are never going to feel comfortable coming back. So we decided then that we were going to create tandem programming. So you could come in person, but we were also going to film the production and offer it online as a ticketed event. And it has been actually a really wonderful learning experience. And it's been a wonderful, it's been a success in terms of engagement. The in-person performances had to end in November, but we were luckily able to film Mary's wedding before it started, but now it's online, and people are grateful for being able to consume new art, right? So we set very modest goals. We said everything has to break even or be revenue generating, but we're talking about low bar. You know, a normal production for us can be anywhere, you know, from $300,000 to $1 million to produce. We weren't producing those shows. We're producing shows that were costing $40,000, $60,000, $80,000. It was putting artists to work. It was putting our crew to work. But we also said, well, we have no idea what online audience we might have. So we didn't set any target for online ticket sales. So what it's done is it's allowed us to create a longer tail of revenue. So Brimful of Asha ended in October, but you can still stream it and buy a ticket to watch it. And so we're playing and creating with this, and our board, again, as we're telling them how we're doing this, like we're going to engage, we're going to create art where we can. They are like, go for it. They're incredibly trusting. They've empowered us, and we're succeeding. We're not, you know, oh, this is what we're going to do from now on. But this is how we're going to keep connected to community and serve our mandate until we can come back to full scale performances. And I think there will be things that we take from this period of time. I refer to it as a gift, but a gift that you wish you had a receipt for. We're going to take the innovations that we did and the new relationships and collaborations, and we're going to carry those on because they've shown us some really new ways to do things.
Right. Yeah. I like the analogy of building the plane as it's flying, because that's definitely, I feel like a lot of organizations and artists are kind of in that same place.
And that's pretty terrifying when you think about it as an analogy. Like,
yes.
you know, it could be a long way down there, and that can, and I think fear can sometimes paralyze us.
Right.
And I understand that. And it's, how do you take a healthy risk? How do you start? How do you know, you don't have to eat the elephant. I'm full of metaphors. You don't have to eat the elephant all at once, but how do you do just like a bite at a time and say, well, I'm going to try this. And if it doesn't work, I'll try something else. And it's challenging because we're afraid of failure. We're afraid of risking our limited resources. We're afraid of letting down the people who rely on us in whatever way they rely on us. And our reputations are at stake. And so we're afraid of that. There's a reputational risk. And then, you know, you do something, you're very, very excited about it, and not everyone's going to like it. And just like it's just like any other thing, don't read the comments. Like, not everyone gets to review you as a human being and as an organization. It's great to get feedback. But there's some people that, you know, aren't going to want what it is that you have. And that's okay, because there's going to be lots that think it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the kind of chunking out. You mentioned the, you know, making plans for maybe 3 months at a time, and, you know, not necessarily because we don't know what's, you know, what 6 months looks like, what next year looks like, but to have realistic goals that I guess your team can get behind 3 months at a time and so on. And I mean, if many people are out there looking, you know, as like revenue generation, I like that you've kind of framed that too, like, hey, you know, this, we might just break even. But that's where we are at, right? And wanting that. So I'm glad that there. You mentioned a plan many times here, and I know for us within the community development unit, we do a lot of work within strategic planning, and you know, we've heard from some of the folks that we've worked with the past few months, like, you know, oh, now's not the time to look at our strategic planning. We got to survive and this and this. But you're saying that now is the time. So tell us about using your strategic plan to help guide the decision making.
Yeah, 100% now is the time. If you don't have one, you need one. And now you actually are in a period of a hibernation where people have low expectations of what we can produce at this time, so you could do it. We were lucky in that we did ours 2.5 years ago, but every planning cycle for our season, we look at our strategic initiatives and we actually create a work plan for our season and say, what are we going to do under these things? When we talk about being inclusive under our, you know, our, how we're going to create theater, and what our values of that. What does that mean this year? And we do things. So when this all went down, we looked at our work plan and we said, well, there's some things in here we absolutely can't do because we're not open. But there were also some things in there we could do. And we said, how do we retain those? And do they look different? Do they sound different? Are we achieving them in a different way? Maybe. And then we adjusted. And then we said, it just gave us such signposts. It was a great, when I say it was a great comfort, as a leader, it's an incredible comfort when we can sit down and say, okay, we're working on this project. We've got this funding. How is this, fulfilling our mandate? We don't work on anything that is not lining up to those strategic initiatives. And if we can't tie it to at least one, and in a big way, but more likely we try and tie it to multiple strategic initiatives, there's only 4 and they all work symbiotically, then we're not going to do it. And it really, it draws a line in the sand for your priorities fast, because you go, that's a great thing to do. It'd be nice. How is that about theater coming first? How is that engaging my stakeholders? How is that transforming my business model? Or how is that lifting up other artists and organizations in this community? If it doesn't do at least one of those things in a big way, we don't do it. And that's, it's sometimes difficult because you have to leave certain things on the table, but we did it. It gave us our map, and it pulled us out of chaos. It was a momentary chaos. Everyone was in it. But we didn't live there. We didn't live there because we had our strategic plan. And as dry and boring as that can sound about governance and strategic planning, trust me, I sit as chair of the board for Edmonton Economic Development, and we work on governance and we do our strategic plan. And I know that it's not something people are like super excited about usually, but it is the best ladder that you can then climb when you're in the hole of uncertainty. Use that to climb. It's your ladder to climb out of that hole, and it works wonderfully, and it resets you all the time.
Right. And so for organizations out there, maybe they haven't, dipped into, moving some of their operations online. Is there any other advice that you would give to them to being able to do that?
I would say that you have to find a very careful balance between nimble, responsive and being urgent, and perfection. Nobody wants to make a move too soon and really drop the ball. But if you wait for something to be perfect, you are missing all of your opportunities. When we realized that we could film Christmas Carol and stream it and sell tickets to it, we scrambled to find an online viewing platform that was the best, easiest experience for many patrons of various ages and abilities out there. But it meant that it wasn't married. It couldn't be married to our ticketing platform. Our ticketing platform is super challenging. We're changing it. But I didn't have 6 months to change my ticketing platform, which is, it's going to take some time. I had 6 weeks to figure out how we were going to sell this. So we pivoted and we said, okay, we're going to make this is going to be a very people hands-on solution. And we were manually sending out codes for Christmas Carol. Now, that was painful and it wasn't perfect, but we sent out 4,200 codes to Christmas Carol in a 1 month long period, which pretty much equates to the number of people that usually come to see it. If you think of households, as opposed to, one streaming code is usually like a family of 4 coming to see us. So it was kind of ugly and warty, and there were tears, mine, others, many people's tears, but we made it happen. So don't let perfection be the enemy of getting it done, because I will tell you that the letters we have received from people and phone calls of people saying they cried when they got to see Christmas Carol and they watched it with their family online and they did like a simultaneous FaceTime while they're all watching it. That's a gift to us, right? We did that thing we've got 900 seniors who got to see it in lockdown in assisted living. And we've got our Edmonton Convention Center, which is a home to our very vulnerable homeless population. And they were having a holiday celebration and they were able to watch it there. That's pretty awesome. And we did it because we scratched and we kind of figured it out. So don't be afraid if it's kind of ugly and clunky and warty. I mean, all of us know what it's like when someone's telling us, oh, you're on mute. Oh, you're cutting out. Your kid's walking behind you. The dog's barking at the Amazon guy. There's so much goodwill for humanity right now. Don't watch CNN right now. I'm telling you, there's goodwill for humanity right now, and for people who are trying to put wonderful creations into the world, that people want to feel connected. And sometimes our foibles and the imperfections is what make people feel connected to us. So don't be afraid. Try it. Put your beautiful, wonderful, creative art out into the world.
Cool. Thank you. I know you're sticking around because I know I'm sure we'll have many questions, but please, we encourage folks to, if you have any specific questions, general questions. I know not many of the people on the call, you may not all run large theaters and big centers, but I think there's a lot of things around the idea of, your strategic plan, taking those risks. Some of the things that you've talked about, Chantell, that is very applicable to any situation, whether you're an artist, nonprofit, and so on. So you're going to stick around. Leah's going to talk about a couple of the tools that you mentioned there, and I know we're going to talk about some of the other programs that we've mentioned in our toolkit that you have there. So please encourage you to in the chat box or in the Q&A have some questions, and we'll have time for Chantell to answer.
Thanks, Justin. All right, so we're going to kind of bring folks back to a few of the tools that were mentioned and platforms that were mentioned in the toolkit, and then we're going to bring Chantell right back in to kind of learn from her experience in terms of what did she use and why, and what led to those decisions. So, we heard her mention Zoom and how she used that particular tool, and there's many like them, and we've got a few listed on the next slide that's going to pop up here. So, many organizations are continuing to operate remotely by connecting with their teams, their audiences, their stakeholders, their clients, those people that access their services. There are several free and low-cost platforms, Zoom, Skype, GoToMeeting, Google Meets, and more, that make it possible to connect visually, to share, just with webcams and screens, and, sharing your screen, sharing the content you've got up, and even contribute to the content through chat boxes, whiteboards, polls. We demonstrated one of those today. You can run meetings, a performance, a service, or a program, that are different and can meet the needs of varying stakeholders that are joining. And while it's different than in person, it's still kind of connecting to that in-person experience. In the online Pivot Online Toolkit, there are links from various sources that will give you tips on how to run great virtual meetings. TechSoup Canada has a fantastic resource specifically addressing COVID and how nonprofits can really facilitate inclusive online gatherings. And I'll ask Justin or maybe Phil to pop the TechSoup Canada link into the chat box for you. So don't be afraid to search out. And I mean, Google has been all of our friends these last little while going, how do I, right? How do I host a great online meeting? How do I get people to engage through Zoom, right? Using those features to help you learn those tools as you go. So once you've chosen the platform that kind of best suits your organization, how you work, what your comfort level is with tech, you can look for guides from those websites, from those platforms to really help you get started. I know myself personally, I've spent a ton of time on Zoom help and Zoom tutorials, and, letting the platform designers teach me how to use it to the best of its ability, so that then I can enhance the experience of those that are engaging. So I want to come back to Chantell, and, you've mentioned that the Citadel uses Zoom as the platform of choice for your organization. Was there, and you mentioned that you kind of started with it because of the ease of use, and it was a fairly simple one to get started. But were there any other reasons why you felt it was kind of the best one for your organization?
Well, when it comes for what we use Zoom for, there was a really low barrier to entry. It was very easy to get on it, like the day of, that we needed to deal with it, and it allows us to expand. So we were trying to teach workshops and do online theater school classes and online performances while having team meetings with and seeing people's faces was really important at that time. Having our old teleconference line was not going to cut it. People were very nervous, and we needed to have webinars for our training about what our protocols were. So it just seemed to hit all the boxes, and it was really affordable for us. And by tagging a person with learning it inside and out, we could kind of offload the stress of learning a new technology. And she became, like I said, the stage manager and producer for all the various big things that were going on. But because we were doing a bunch of different things, so we were teaching master classes in a format much like this. We were doing interactive classes for the school where, you know, people are participating. We were having meetings, we were having town halls. It really worked well for us. We didn't use it for performances. We did a lot of stuff on Facebook by recording and then using the Facebook watch party. And then when we started, moved to, there's two things that we've used for platforms for our performances that we filmed, you know, the actual theater programs that we filmed. One is there's an option under YouTube to do private links where you can have up to 50 people get a private link that is tied to their email address, so you can limit access and it can't be shared out. And we've done that when we've had to share things with schools where there's limited programs that they can maybe, you know, going on to a separate third party might not work. And then we combined that with our ticketing platforms. They could buy a ticket there and then we'd send them the separate Zoom link. Because we were, or separate YouTube link, pardon me. Because we were doing things manually, because our ticket system was such a challenge, it was actually easier because then we're like, oh, you can't use the platform you're using? We'll send you this. And that made it easier for some people. So that's an option for people around using that YouTube private watching if you've got an account up to 50 people, and then combining it with some sort of ticketing platform like Eventbrite, you know, so that had worked for us. When we got to selling tickets online for Carol, for you know, various, you know, our various shows, then we used our ticketing platform, which is Theater Manager. It's a bit of a challenge, but we needed to find a much bigger hosting platform. Carol was shot in 4K. That's a huge file. So that wasn't going to live. That was going to live on our server. I told you about our Nortel phones. So we actually partnered with Broadway On Demand. And they're a really easy platform to use. There's some different cost levels there. I mean, you pay per stream. Our challenge, because like I said, the only other option was if we didn't manually send them a code, is they could buy on the website, but they're buying in American dollars. So that created some challenges, and we didn't want to deal with some of that confusion and, you know, agita of people going, it's supposed to be this amount, and I got charged, you know, instead of got charged $40, got charged $41.73 because of the exchange rate at any given time. So we went with Broadway On Demand, and that is probably where we will continue to have our video, like our full-length theater productions, live because of the size of them. When they can't live with us, but we have used YouTube as a workaround when we've worked with organizations who couldn't access Broadway On Demand because of their firewalls or because of their rules, that kind of thing. So, you know, we really tried to just make sure that it was as accessible and easy to use for people as possible.
Well, and I love that you were constantly looking for solutions, right? All right, schools can't, I mean, and schools have one of the most restrictive firewalls, understandably so. So, you know, Google Meets doesn't work for schools. Sometimes Zoom doesn't, sometimes it does. And so being able to find these workarounds so that you can still create that connection, right? Still offer that amazing learning opportunity to the students is great. And I didn't even know that YouTube had that feature. So that was a great, you know, piece of advice to share with folks.
We didn't either until we needed it. And then we looked for it. So sometimes, and I think platforms change so quickly, is just because a feature wasn't there last time you used it. Because I was like, I am sure like Vimeo has that password option. I said, let's check and see, because we already had a YouTube channel. Let's see if we can create private watch parties. And we could. So that was, you know, it helped. It certainly helped.
Yeah, and I think you raise a great point. All of these platforms are evolving and adapting so rapidly. Like I remember from when we started using Zoom, you know, maybe a year ago, to even how we're using it now. And you've got the polls, the chat, the breakout rooms, the closed captioning, you know, and as you get the upgrades, you get more reactions. So the software is adapting as the needs are emerging. So that's the other piece I think is really interesting to think about, is give feedback to the developers, you know, because if they know there's a need and there's a big enough need, then they might see what they can do to tie it into the system if it's suitable. So I'm gonna stick on Zoom for just a second, and I'm gonna kind of ask, how did you use? I mean, for most of us, we've participated.
Yeah.
You know, we've joined, we've clicked the link. Maybe we do chat, maybe we respond to a poll. But I'm curious, kind of from the back end management side of it. You know, how did you use some of the enhanced features that some folks might not be as familiar with, like breakout rooms or those kind of things? That interactive piece.
That's right. Well, so we used it in all the ways we could, which is why we decided it was a tool for us. So when we've had, for example, we worked really hard on an equity and diversity audit this summer and creating a report and sharing that out. So as we were working through that process and discussing different things, we would, and again, we had a subject matter expert. Our producer learned Zoom in a month, and she is an expert now. She could probably tell them all the things they need to do differently. And being able to say, okay, how are we going to use it for this particular purpose? If we're having a town hall, should we have breakout rooms and, you know, with different departments and talk about these things and come back, or with our board doing, because I will tell you, even though we're working off our strategic plan, we're still doing strategy days with our board and talking about specific things with them. So we've used the breakout rooms for that and been able to then come back and share what we've learned and integrated it with other, you know, with other items, you know, with other types of programs that allow you, like whiteboard and that kind of thing. And then we've used it a lot for teaching. It has been great for the theater school, and it has been great for master classes. So as much as we're not using it for performances, you know, we're not inviting a bunch of people to performances on Zoom, is that we're using it very much for education and professional development. And how do we engage with our board, our stakeholders, that kind of thing. So that's very much what we're using it for. And realizing that we could host a webinar with a moderator, and then we could have these big meetings, and then we could have these, it helped us use it for different purposes. When we want to just talk to our subscribers and say, hey, this is what's happening, this is what our plan is, we'll keep you up to date, and letting people sign on, but not having to worry about, oh, they're on, they're off, who's on mute, who's got their microphone on with their dog barking, was wonderful that way. You know, and for an organization that has multiple needs, it worked for us.
That's great to hear how it can adapt to what you needed, and you find the ideal uses for it, and then you look for something else if it's not suitable, which is kind of great to see the versatility of the different platforms and how we use them. Now, I do want to talk about one other piece. And this is kind of that online course marketplace. So for artists and nonprofit organizations that are looking at providing training or services online, online courses may be an option. Online course options can be a significant revenue generator, a simple way to get content out to the wide audience, and a way to help individuals who are expanding their skills through remote learning. These online course platforms provide individuals with access to digital classes on almost any teachable topic. And these virtual courses are similar to offline classes in several ways. An instructor provides an engaging educational experience through video, image, text, audio, and maybe PDF files. And when it comes to selling online courses, there are essentially two options. You can self-host your courses or sell it online in a marketplace like Skillshare or Udemy or Teachable. So you had mentioned, Chantell, that the Citadel Theatre School and Artistic Professional Development programs moved online within the last 9 months. And you were able to continue to provide that learning in the theater kind of arts genre for all ages with online workshops. Can you provide us with a little bit of how you kind of made that happen?
Sure.
And why did you opt to self-host rather than maybe looking at one of these marketplace options?
I think a big part of it was that we were making these decisions on the fly. You know, if we were planning on doing these kinds of things, like if a year ago you told me next year you're going to have to offer these things online, we might have done a broader survey of tools, and we might have, you know, we might have sat there and discussed it. There's nothing like a good crisis to just force you to act. So we were looking and going, how do we lean into this in the quickest way possible? We had kids at home very upset they were missing their programming, and how do we do that? How do we provide performances? How do we do this master classes? And we generally don't we actually created new programming for professional development in that we had a grant and we thought we can use this in a different way. And we reached out to playwrights, choreographers, people from, you know, all over the industry, and we were able to bring, I mean, it was kind of wonderful because normally we wouldn't have, you know, Toby Marlowe, who's a playwright for Six, come and do a playwriting masterclass at the Citadel. You know, he's in New York. He was able to do it through the magic of Zoom. So part of it was just, we used the platform because we knew about it and we thought we can adjust to it. And it was the tool that we had, and we could very quickly, like within a few days, start to put these programs out, because I think there was an urgency there. It was, this is not, we're not planning for a year and a half from now, which is normally what we do. We're planning for tomorrow, and that we have to change. So
yeah, no, that's so true. I mean, as much as we'd like to plan for how we're going to make these transitions, I think the one thing that this pandemic has kind of initiated is the need to just do it, and then figure it out as you go. You know, flying the plane while you're building it. I think that in one ways it's helped us, many of us, many organizations, many departments make that leap, right? Instead of thinking about it. And I know I did a bunch of research for our own unit around what are the best platforms for us to do some of our work online. And you can get lost in the multitude of options. And the fact that we kind of had to make a decision and just get on with it made it a little bit easier, because you didn't have the time to get stuck looking and researching and hoping and trying to figure out, is this the perfect one for me? It was, this looks like it'll work, let's give it a go, and then we'll see how we make it work as we continue.
absolutely.
I am cognizant of time, and I do see that we have a few questions popping up in the Q&A that I'd love to get to. And some of them are directed to you, Chantell, so I'll kind of be a bit of a moderator and make sure that you can cover them. And then I'll also put the call out to all of our participants. If you do have other questions you want us to try and get to, please pop them into either the chat box or the Q&A. The first one is kind of referring back to your strategic initiatives, and you had mentioned that the Citadel had 4 key strategic initiatives. They caught the first one, which is the inclusion one, but they were hoping you could share what your other ones were.
You bet. Inclusion actually falls under our first initiative. So we have theater comes first, and the values of our theater productions, that they're inclusive, they're innovative, and they're international. So that's the first one. The second one is we want to amplify the love, and that is leaning into our relationship with our stakeholders. And when we describe our stakeholders, that is our team, our ticket buyers, our sponsors, our government funders. It is our, you know, all of those people in the community that, you know, we are serving. So that's our second one. The third is we want to be the heart and hub of the arts in downtown Edmonton. So how do we lift up other artists? How do we lift up other forms of art? How do we take what we know and the tools we have, our building, our expertise, and help smaller, you know, companies, other types of art forms be seen, and then how do we amplify what they're doing? And the fourth was transforming our business model. So how do we shift away from the traditional view of what theater is for the last 55 years and say, we are transforming our business model so that we are as self-sustaining as possible. So that when we looked at, you look at the filter of those 4 strategic initiatives and the kind of work we've been doing over the last 9 months, you can, it's actually really easy to see how it fits in with those. So it has been, like I said, it's been wonderful to be able to just look at those 4 and use them as our guideposts.
That's great. And thank you so much for sharing that. We do have a couple questions kind of speaking to the platforms you used for the Christmas Carol in particular. And I believe you had mentioned it was Broadway On Demand, but maybe you can give a little bit more information on that.
Certainly. Broadway On Demand is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is made for theater productions that are produced digitally to be watched elsewhere. And they have a variety of options that you can have as a creator. You can do a one-off and put it up there. You can create your own sort of landing page. It's called the white label solution, where you have a place where it's all your stuff. We didn't have the time to do that. I would have actually preferred to do that because we're planning on having online programming going forward, hopefully. But we kind of pick something in the middle ground. So they host it, you load it up to them, then it doesn't live on your server, which if it's a big file is really, really nice. They have an option where they can sell the tickets for you, depending on what your ticketing platform is and how you're working through that. We didn't have that option because of what our ticketing platform is, so we went and did it all manually. But that's what we chose because of the size and length of our productions, and because we were going to have a number of them and a number of them going forward. It seemed like the right place. Now, if it ends up not being the right place, we'll find something else.
Yeah. Well, and it's, you start with what you can find until you can find something that's better, potentially. There is a question in terms of your relationship with the artists and the performers, and did the pay scale change? Did, A, because of the need to kind of remain financially sustainable, and B, that was an online performance versus an in-person performance? I don't want you to have to go too far into your own operations, but is there anything you can share around that?
There were some changes around, like having to deal with the fact that we were filming and putting stuff online. But I will say that I want to say the pay scale didn't change, it actually increased. So we believe in paying artists for their work. We believe in people being able to pay their bills with their profession and their skills. So we've never gone to artists and asked them to take less money. And we're a professional theater and we're bound by, our agreements. What the challenge is with when you're doing something in theater plus online is you're dealing with two sort of different animals. One is a contract that governs stage performances, and one is a contract that governs TV and film. And those are two different unions, and they have two different pay scales. And we were very lucky that we worked with both unions, and we said, look, we're going to pay people, and then we need to pay them an additional amount to take into account that this is going to also be online. But it wasn't like two separate projects. It was an additional rider amount to compensate them for the fact that it would be online. And we were able to make it make sense, because the online sales are much smaller than the in-person sales generally. I mean, at some point they may be bigger. For us right now, they're smaller. And we just worked with the artists and we made sure they got paid, because they have bills to pay as well. And we want them all to make it through this so that they can be on our stages again. And then we just, we changed it. It had a little bit of an extra expense in the fact that we were filming as well. With Carol, we didn't do anything on the stage, so we went under one contract for filming. So what didn't have that double, the double contract situation we had to deal with.
And I think one of the things I've heard throughout everything that you have shared has really been the need to communicate, talk with people, be open, have those discussions. Don't be afraid to say, this is what we want to do. Now, how can we work together to do that? And I think we've all kind of see the importance of, we have to have good conversation to help figure out how we're going to solve these problems. So I love that you're kind of bringing that back into play in terms of, we talked to them. We made sure we communicated, we problem solved collectively. Like, we didn't want to undermine anyone. We wanted to do this together in partnership. So that's great to hear. There's a couple pieces here that kind of speaking to using Zoom, and one is more, how do you continue to grow that engagement and kind of keep your ideas fresh and new? And you had mentioned those, planning every 3 months. Is there other ways you are incorporating that? How do we keep that excitement and that interest and keep them coming back?
Yeah, and it's a challenge. I think people are kind of, they've got some screen fatigue. We've got COVID fatigue. We got all the fatigues, so it's a challenge to keep people engaged. So really by having a variety of things going on. So we have everything from classes and things that you passively watch to things that you're engaged in. So we did, a paint class with our scenic painter, where we sent paint kits out to people's houses, and they, had a glass of wine and did a follow along paint class with our scenic painter. So it was great because people could see our behind the scenes folks that have been impacted by this. They could support them. We were providing them a fun activity. So really trying to keep, how do we do, different kinds of fundraisers online so that you can have performances. Partnerships are really important. We partnered with Lucy Darling, and they did this great magic show on Zoom, and we supported them, sold tickets. They did some filming in our building. You get creative and keep it fresh. If you wouldn't want to watch the same thing over and over again, don't produce the same thing over and over again. And by having different types of things, people want to engage in different ways. Some people want to be seen, are comfortable participating in and engaging in something that is, they're talking, they're being seen. Other people are quite happy to sit back, but they still want to support you. So find ways to engage with people at their different comfort levels. And recognize that people have different barriers to participating with what you have on offer.
No, thank you so much for sharing that in terms of just how do you keep it going, right? There's a question here, and if you're not fully comfortable answering it, we might be able to provide some input to it as well. But the advantages or disadvantages of using Zoom meetings versus Zoom webinars, the two kind of options in their platform. Are you familiar with them, and kind of can you tell us why you opted for what you did?
Yeah, depending on what we're doing. So we use Zoom meetings when we want participation and feedback in a much more robust way, or if we're going to be breaking people out into rooms to discuss something, much more interactive. We use webinars when we're dealing with a really big number of people. So if all of a sudden we have, 150 people that that are signing on, and we don't want to deal, sorry that we don't want to, we know that we can't deal with the chaos of that. And so then we do it more in a webinar format like this, because if we had, you know, everybody that's on this webinar on the screen asking questions or raising their hands at once, it would probably be difficult to get through. So, you know, it's deciding what are we trying to achieve with this particular thing we're doing. Is it just sharing information? Do we need lots of input? Are we trying to teach, and are we trying to engage, and who it is too? I mean, how you engage with kids teaching at a theater class is different than how you're engaging with all of your funders who want to hear what's going on. So, you know, really tailoring what part of the tool we're using and how we're using it to who we're talking to. Even when we did our donor and subscriber town hall to explain what was going on, we actually preloaded 3 performances in advance that were from Stuck in the House, so that when they all came on a little bit early, because we thought, oh, it might be a while, we might need some troubleshooting, invite them in early, they had something to watch. We don't do that, you know, obviously at every webinar.
Yeah, and that's great to share. And I know from our perspective, when we're facilitating, which, you know, we do quite often, Zoom meetings is by far the tool we need, because we want to be able to put people in breakout rooms. We want to be able to have the chat and them to unmute and speak and share and really make it conversational and very engaging. Whereas for this system and the Zoom webinars, it's much more suited to that broader audience, where you're really trying to manage who can unmute, right? Because if you have 120 people on and everyone unmutes at once, we're probably going to crash the system. So
have we all been on the call where someone's going through the drive-through and they're ordering a burger while they're on?
Yes, we have, I'm sure.
Very entertaining, but not helpful for someone who's trying to speak.
Yeah, and so I think, as you had mentioned, it is really about how do you want your participants to engage? Is it truly an engaging conversation type use? Then maybe you need to stick with the Zoom meeting option, because it gives you the choice to do breakout rooms, and you can pop up the whiteboard and everyone can contribute, or use one of the integrated softwares that allow you to do that. Whereas with the webinar, it's a little bit more that info out piece. There's still some opportunity to engage through the Q&A or the chat box, but it's a little bit more limited. But as the hosts, you also have more control, right? You can manage and mute everyone. So if someone can't find their mute button, no worries, we've got it. So there are those two kind of, what are you using it for, and what kind of engagement are you hoping to get, I think are the big pieces to consider when you're looking at what am I going to use, which version of Zoom. We do have a couple questions that are kind of tied to how can new immigrants, new Canadians connect and engage with the Citadel? You know, there's many talented new Canadians, and how can they reach you? How can they make connection with you?
It depends on what it is they're looking for in terms of connecting. We do newcomer programming. When we have people in the theater, we have newcomer nights for a number of shows every year, including Christmas Carol, where it's a free evening for newcomers to come and experience the theater and some fellowship and usually some refreshments. So if it's just about, you know, getting into the building and getting, you know, acquainted with what we do, that is one way. We have a very large volunteer force that works the front of house and works within our building. And often we get newcomers, particularly while they're waiting to build up their employment skills and get a paid employment, to come and volunteer. Sometimes they'll volunteer with our organization as a way, again, to get to know people, to get to know the community. And we are very dedicated to telling a wide variety of stories and bringing a wide variety of voices into our storytelling. So, you know, for artists, for playwrights, looking at some of our playwriting opportunities and our classes, or looking at some of the residencies that we offer, I think would be a great way for a newcomer to engage and build an artistic practice with the Citadel.
No, that's great to see the variety of ways that they can engage with you, from the creative side to just, you know, using it as a community building and an opportunity to connect with people side, and you know, skill development that'll serve them going forward. So that's kind of wonderful to hear. I know, I mean, obviously as a theater and an arts kind of production organization, our conversations have been fairly focused on the arts, but would you say there's some key learnings or tips that would very much be transferable to just about any nonprofit organization who's trying to connect, you know, more of a community service type group? What are some of those lessons that you think would be valuable regardless of the type of offerings nonprofits have?
Well, lean into your mandate. You know, if you haven't done a strategic plan, you don't have strategic initiatives, lean into your mandate. What are you on this earth to do as an organization? And how do you do that in these circumstances is really, really, I think, important. Communication with your board, with your team, even when it's, I have no idea what is going to happen. There were many times, and I committed to, you know, communicating with our team regularly, especially at the start. We were communicating, you know, on a daily basis, that it was not sure what's happening here. This is very much up in the air. Still nothing's happened. Getting people behind your cause early as you can, and finding that expertise within your organization to go out and try the new things. Don't be afraid to try the new things and develop some new expertise and take some chances, because it will probably give you some new ways to engage whoever your stakeholders are on a go forward basis, because things, we're not going back, we're only going forward, and things are going to be forever changed. And you can decide if you chose the change or if it changed you out of no choice.
Yeah, very true. And I think some of the other things that we could probably take forward just from what I've heard you share in terms of the lessons you've learned is find a tool that you think might work and try it. You know, if you're trying to engage with your clientele or the people you provide services to, or, you know, find a way that you can connect with them, Zoom or, you know, Google Meets or whatever you're familiar with, and try it. And I think the other thing I heard you say is talk. You know, you've communicated with so many different people about so many different options. I think one of the questions that's becoming much more common is, what are you using to make this happen? Right? So if you have a circle of organizations that are similar to your own, how are you doing this? How have you connected with your stakeholders? How have you connected? Right? So you don't have to do it all alone. I mean, I know I've asked all of my colleagues and, you know, people in the community, what are you using? What have you learned? What have been your lessons? What are you seeing? Right? So I think there's that, as you said, people are forgiving. People have opened up quite a bit around, yeah, I'll share my experiences so that you don't have to stumble through it the way that I did.
Absolutely.
I do notice that we have just a couple more questions, and I'm very cognizant of time, so I'll try and get through these. There's one organization that is wondering how they can connect with you directly, so I think we'll just pop your email address into the response, if that's okay. There's one question here about when you were doing both modalities, the live and online, how did you ensure it was an engaging experience for both audiences?
Well, we didn't do live streaming, and we made the decision not to do live streaming because what we had seen happen with other folks, you know, being stuck with the vagary of what your Wi-Fi may be. And if you've been in the Citadel Theatre, it's basically a gigantic bunker of concrete and steel. So Wi-Fi is really not a great thing for us to be broadcasting out of our theaters on. In fact, I think specifically we have terrible Wi-Fi in our theater, so people stay off their phones during live performances. So we made sure that we were actually filming it in a great way with a great quality film lighting. We have an on staff videographer who has a private production company, and so we've got, you know, the challenge. I think the biggest challenge was not about engaging people online, because they watched it, they loved it, we got great. They knew what to expect. They're having an online experience and they're watching the show. It was bringing 100 people into a theater of 800 and wanting them to still feel connected to what's going on the stage, even though they were all spread out, which is exactly the opposite of what we usually do. So the online engagement, people were so grateful to be able to experience it. And that's what we got. We got zero criticisms or complaints about the fact that it was online. It was, thank you for making this happen, because I'm not comfortable coming back to the theater yet. And I still got to see this show. So you know, that was really when you're telling people that we're producing these things for you, they were just grateful and there and saying, we're going to buy a ticket because we want to support you. So we're very lucky that way. It was more around how do we deal with the patron experience in the building was our bigger challenge.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear how you kind of really focused on both sides of that experience and tried to really honor both sides. Speaking of audience and audience experience, there's one question here that speaks to your opportunity to reach a broader audience when you moved online. And did you take this opportunity that kind of COVID presented to really expand your audience? And if so, can you share a little bit about how that went and who you were able to reach?
Absolutely. you have to be very mindful when you're going online, and this is why I think a lot of theaters haven't done it, is because you only have the rights to produce that play and reach an audience in a certain geographic area. So for example, Brimful of Asha, we have the rights for anyone in Alberta to have that streamed to them. Christmas Carol, it was Canada. So you have to, you can reach out to a broader audience within limits. We ultimately used a lot of digital marketing, and we got an expert to help us because that is not our bailiwick. So we used a local firm, Top Draw, to do digital marketing, particularly for Christmas Carol, because we've never marketed digitally to that extent where we only have a digital product. And they would test different markets for us, and they would say, okay, we'll try and add in this postal code, or, you know, is it BC? Can we do Saskatchewan? So we had some success with that. Where I think most of that success came from was our local community purchasing online streaming for their family elsewhere. You know, you've got a sister or your mom's in Quebec and you want to do something for her nice, but buying her Christmas Carol so she could watch it because you couldn't see her. We saw a lot of that happening where people would come in and buy a dozen codes and send them out to their family throughout Canada. So broader audience. I think our most interesting new audience is the fact that our cast could finally see themselves in the show, because none of them have seen the show before because they're always in it, but we filmed it, they could watch it, and they were able to share it with family members and friends outside of the city who could then see them in the show. We also really worked very hard to reach out to schools, particularly in rural areas and on reserve, and to allow them to be able to maybe access something that they normally wouldn't have access to. So we're still playing with that, and we will continue to do that. It wasn't a big part of our success of like, oh, half the people came from elsewhere, but you can see the seeds that we're planting for that. And then we can reach out to them again and say, here's another experience we can offer you. So remarketing is really important. Find out who's watching your stuff and send them more.
Exactly. You don't lose that opportunity now that you've created it. We do have one last question, which I think will be really quick to answer. Is it still possible to get a code for Christmas Carol?
It is not, because it ended December 31st, but you can get a code for Brimful of Asha until the 10th, and Mary's Wedding is on for the next year. And we're trying to extend Brimful of Asha because people have loved it so much. So Christmas Carol has been put away with the Christmas trees. Fair enough.
We'll have to look forward to it next year. So I am going to wrap us up. We have gone a little bit over, so thank you for staying with us this whole time. And I do just want to say a sincere thank you to you on behalf of us as the facilitators and hosts, as well as I think on behalf of our participants. The valuable learnings and experiences you were able to share to help people understand the journey and maybe be willing to take a few more steps into their own journey, I think is just amazing. And your willingness to answer questions. And I know we've popped your email address into the chat box for people who have some very art kind of specific questions that you can maybe answer, or someone on your staff or might be better suited to answer. So we just truly appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and to share all your experiences. And we just want to say thank you. It's been wonderful to share these learnings and to hear what one of our locally grown organizations has been able to accomplish during these challenging times.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope we'll see you all at the theater when we can come together safely again.
Hopefully. And if not, we'll see you online.
Absolutely.
And to our participants, we do have a brief evaluation we would love for you to complete for us. It'll pop up just as we close out this meeting. And it's just our way of making sure that we're reaching our stakeholders and hearing from you and continually focusing on how we can get better. So as we end this meeting, the evaluation will pop up. And if you could be so kind as to take 2 seconds to just give your feedback, we would really appreciate it. And if you are interested, check back on our Eventbrite site under the Community Development Unit. We have a listing of any future webinars that we have available, so you can always check in on those. And other than that, we hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for joining us today.